1. Backstory. So this happened 2 years ago this summer. I was 16, turning 17 soon. At the time, I had a babysitting gig for the summer, a job at the local gym by my house, and walked everywhere in my town, as I did not have my license yet. In general, it is a small, safe town in California. This day started off like normal, me walking to the kid's house, the mom going over instructions for the day, etc. She liked having me do activities with the kids in town like swimming, going to the park, just generally being active and not hanging around the house all day. Anyways, on this day I took them on a long walk, and we stopped at a Subway for lunch around 1 p.m. As we were finishing, their mom texted me and said that she was done with work early, and said I could meet her a few stores down at Starbucks. We walked down and I dropped the kids off with her, ordered a drink, and left around 2:30 p.m. I began walking to a park about 3/4 of a mile to 1 mile away to meet with another mom I was going to potentially babysit for as well. About a block down from Starbucks, there is a Safeway. Right as I began passing Safeway's parking lot, a guy flung his door open and hopped out of his car parked above the sidewalk. This guy looked to be about late 20s, maybe even early 30s, taller than me, about 5'11", 6 feet, and messy hair with a thick beard. He flagged me down and said, "Hey, I'm new in town." Now, like I stated, this is normally a safe town, the kind you would want to raise a family in or retire in at first. I didn't want to be rude, so I said, "Oh, cool." No red flags were going off yet. As being a naive 16-year-old girl, I figured that it was safe to be friendly for a couple seconds and keep going on my way because of where I live. Then he abruptly asked, "Since I'm new here and I don't know anyone yet, and you seem like a nice girl, you want to hop in and show me around?" Red flag number 1. I quickly replied, "Sorry, can't do that for you, I'm busy." I figured he would take the hint. He said, "Oh, come on. I'm not a creep. I'm like 29. How old are you? 18? 19? And began looking around us and fidgeting with his hands and his pockets. Red flag number 2. "No, I'm 17, sorry. You can go find some people your age down the street. Over there." I lied about my age because I was getting nervous at this point and didn't want to give him my actual age. Also, I was really hoping he would take the hint when I pointed him in the direction of the bars down the street I pointed, to find people his own age to talk to. He stuttered and said, Actually, I'm 20. I was just kidding about being older." He laughed and looked around again. "Come on, just get in the car, it'll be fun. I'm not that much older." His voice took a more serious and persistent tone. Red flag number 3. At this point, I felt really scared and just wanted to get away from him, so I quickly shook my head and began walking away. I looked behind me to see if he was following me, only to see him getting in his car. I felt relieved and thought, pretty stupidly, that he was going down that street. A girl probably a couple years older than me caught up to me to check on me, as she had witnessed and heard everything. She asked if I needed any help, and if I wanted to call the police. I said thanks, but I think I shook him, so I'll be fine. I appreciated her looking out for me, but I did not feel that I was in any danger anymore. I still kicked myself for not calling the police when she offered. After passing the gas station, I saw his car come flying down the next street. He stopped in the middle of the crosswalk, blocking me from crossing. He rolled down his window and began harassing me. "Hey girl, when you turning 18, huh? When you turning 18, come on, we can have some fun, girl. We don't need to wait till you're 18. You can just come with me now and have some fun. You're a cute girl, come on now. You have a nice body." He said all of this with an evil, sickening smirk. I was in full panic mode and didn't even think at this point. I ran around the front of his car into the street, then back onto the sidewalk on the other side, and ran down the sidewalk. I looked behind me to see him speeding in the other direction. I slowed down again and called my mom. I told her everything that had happened, and she insisted on picking me up and driving to my destination. I agreed. So when I'm at the stoplight, just under a quarter mile away from the park, I see him driving down the street again. He drove by me slowly, still wearing that sickening grin and winking at me before speeding off again. I called my mom, freaking the hell out. So of course, after she picked me up, we called the police on the way to the park. The officer pulled in right around the same time as us at the park, so I got out of the car to go give my statement on what happened and give a description of the man and his car. He also asked if I managed to get a license plate number. Unfortunately, I only got the first few numbers and letters, not the whole plate. He informed me and my mom that he would be going back to the station to file a report. Against the officer and my mom's suggestions, I stayed at the park, as I did not want to make a bad impression on someone I was potentially babysitting for. She arrived after my mom and the officer left. Immediately after the interview I had, my dad picked me up, because there was no way I was walking home. The officer contacted us later that night, saying that they got a potential match for the vehicle I described with the partial plate number I gave them. However, nothing ever came of it. Since the incident, I have been carrying self-defense items, alarms, pepper spray, etc., on my keychain. I don't ever leave my house without something to protect myself. After I got my license, I haven't been walking around that town much, even if I'm with my friends or boyfriend. Which is sad because it is a beautiful town. I'm now 18 years old and I'm still haunted by what happened. Whenever I see a similar car or similar guy, I panic a little, even in the safety of my own car. To this day, I honestly don't know what I was thinking every time I thought he was gone for sure. I guess part of me was really just hoping he was gone. To whoever that creepy asshole was, let's not meet. 2. I work at a grocery store as a cashier, and have met so many different types of people that I'd rather not meet again, but this one takes the cake for sure. The store I work at is open 24 hours, and this was one of the first few times I had to work the night shift. Most people don't go grocery shopping past 10 p.m., so night shifts are usually just one cashier and one manager or supervisor. My manager was in her office, and I was just on my phone trying my best to stay awake. Since I don't usually work night shifts, I was struggling a little bit once it hit about 12:30 a.m. It wasn't busy, and the parking lot was empty except for my car, my manager's car, and another car sitting by the line of shopping carts. The car was running with the headlights off, but the interior lights on, and a fairly large bald dude sitting hunched over with his hands firmly holding the top of the steering wheel and staring inside the store. I was very startled by this because of how eerie and creepy it felt. After a few seconds of me staring back at him, he turned his car off and the interior lights and got out of the car. He started walking around to grab a cart. I wrote it off as maybe he didn't know we were 24 hours and was trying to read the sign on the door. I ignored the fact that he would have needed his headlights on to read it. He came into the store and started scanning the aisles. I went back on my phone, because if it was just an average Joe, then I didn't want to make him uncomfortable. About 15 or 20 minutes goes by and he comes up to checkout with a cart full, and I mean full, of jars of mayonnaise and a singular vegetable platter. This was confusing, but I tried not to be judgmental. He took a little while to start unloading the cart because he was scanning the magazines rack that most registers have right there at checkout. He grabbed one of those teen celebrity magazines like 17 or J14 or something, which didn't help his creep factor. He started unloading his cart and I scanned the jars as soon as they came up so that this would go as fast as possible. He greeted me with a,
"Hi, how are you, young lady?"
but in a Daffy Duck impression. I was so confused and creeped out, but I just said that I was well and asked him how he was. He responded with,
"I'm just so dandy on this fine evening,"
in the same Daffy Duck voice. I was beginning to get more scared rather than creeped out. I ignored it and asked him if he had a rewards card for our store. He said no in a normal voice. I told him the price of his transaction and he fumbled around in his pockets for his wallet. He asked me if I liked his impression and if it was good. Honestly, the impression was pretty spot on, which is why it was freaking me out so much. I told him that it was good, trying to stay polite and calm. He handed me some cash, and I opened the register to get his change. As I was handing him his change, he held onto my hand and leaned over the credit card machine. He asked me if I'd ever been to a party with that much mayonnaise. I said no, and pulled my hand away, which he reluctantly let go of. He was still leaning over the credit card machine and said,
"Well, I won't get into too much detail, but it's not for the veggies."
He winked and put his change in his wallet and began taking his grocery bags and putting them in his cart. He began acting like he was in pain and asked me to help him put the bags in his car. I was not about to do that because this guy was beyond creepy. I told him that I wasn't allowed to leave the register because I was the only one working. He tried to push it, but I told him again I was not allowed to leave the register. I don't know if that was actually a rule, but neither did he, so I used it as an excuse not to go with him anyway. He gave me a puppy dog face and pleaded with his hands, and I told him once again that I was not allowed to leave, and that if he didn't stop, I would call my manager down. He stopped immediately, scoffed at me, and left without saying another word. He loaded his car and left the car in the parking lot, even though the line of carts was right next to his car, like literally 3 feet away. I'm assuming he probably wanted to see if I would come out and put it back, but I wasn't going out there. He got in his car, turned it on, and resumed the same position he had been in before he came in. I called my manager down after like 3 minutes of him just sitting there again, just like before, because it was really scaring me at this point. She came down and looked out the window at him, and he drove away. I told her everything that happened, and she said that I was in the right by not going with him, and that if I saw him again to call the police. Apparently this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this during the night shift, to a couple other female co-workers. Needless to say, I made damn sure I never had another night shift again after that. So, to the incredibly creepy mayonnaise man who tried to get me to go to his car in the middle of the night, let's never meet again. 3. I was about 13 when my family went on our annual trip to Poland to visit family. My mother and father both came from a small rural village about 2 to 3 hours away from Warsaw. It's an idyllic little place that is surrounded by lush forest and wheat fields. Life is different there. Everyone is very carefree and relaxed. Being the small place it is, everyone knows one another since everyone essentially lives on the same street. I had made a bit of a reputation for myself there, being known as the American girl who visits in the summers. So whenever we would arrive, the whole village would know. I loved the attention. All the kids wanted to play and adults doted on me. One of the townspeople I saw most frequently was Tomek. Tomek was a funny guy in his upper 20s who would work in the village deli store. He would always give me extra meat anytime my grandparents would send me out to pick food up, or offer to show me inside the kitchen. I never took him up on that offer. The idea of seeing how my meat was made was too much for my 13-year-old mind, though I didn't know it at the time. Tomek had a reputation of being the town lunatic. He wasn't a stranger to the police force, nor the villagers, as he was a bit of a petty thief. My grandparents told me when I got older that my grandfather had not once but twice caught him trying the doors of his shed and then excusing himself when caught, as drunk and unsure where he was. Despite this, I never had a reason to fear or avoid him. The village had a tradition called Gra Odwagi, which translates to the Game of Courage. That would fall in between the dates of our visits. On this day, the village children would be set into teams and then given items to find that were hidden around the woods and or village perimeters. The event lasted all day, and the group that had the most found items would win a prize. The courage part of the game would be trying to attain the golden item, which would be in the woods and guarded by a few adults armed with water sprayers and water guns. The only way to get the golden item was to avoid being sprayed with water. If all members of a team were hit, then the team would lose the chance to attain it. My team consisted of my 4 friends, Eva, Arik, Barak, and Pavel. Our strategy was to get as many of the items around town and then try our luck at the golden object, when it got darker in order to be harder to spot. We got a lot of the items throughout the day, and worked up a good sweat after racing against the other children. Around 7 p.m. we had attained 12 items, and were ready to try our luck at the golden item. We had heard from the other children that the adults were being relentless, guarding the object with ferocity. The wooded area that was the destination as the golden item area was behind Eric's house. Therefore, he took the lead in devising the plan. Our plan was that we were going to split up into 2 teams. Arik, Ava, and Bartek were meant to grab the adults' attention and drive them away as far as possible, while Paavo and I would sneak in and grab the item. Feeling confident, we headed into the forest as the sun was slipping from the sky. We followed the dirt path for about 5 minutes and then stepped off it, following Arik as he navigated through the shrubbery with ease. He stopped us just as we reached a thick clump of bushes. Putting a finger to his lips, he motioned for us to look through the gaps in the shrubbery and see the adults. It was dark now, so it was hard to see who was actually guarding the items, but we could make out 4 shapes huddled together, chatting softly. Without hesitation, we moved into our plan of action. Our 3 friends navigated around and disappeared from our sight, only for us to hear the laughs and voices of the adults yelling to get them. Paavo and I watched as the adults raced after our friends, all abandoning the area they had stood around. I remember glancing around and getting ready to jump out of the bushes, when I felt Paavo's arm on my shoulder and saw him make a shushing sound. "They might not all be gone. Wait a bit," he urged. We sat quietly, listening intently for any sounds. Then it happened. The slightest sound of something moving on the other side of the clearing. We couldn't make out who or what it was, so we stayed quiet, peering through the gaps of the shrubbery. Paavo saw it first. He pointed out what looked like a dark figure crouching behind a tree closest to the clearing. We watched as the figure moved tree to tree, never stepping out from behind, just simply observing. Just as I was about to suggest that one of us should cause a distraction, we hear a yelp and turn to see another team approaching, clearly happy that there seemed to be no one around where the golden item should be. We watched as this small group of 2 raced around the clearing but didn't pick anything up. I kept waiting for the adult to step out and spray the kids, but the figure remained crouched, half visible behind the trees. One of the girls approached the area the adult was, but she was busy looking up at the tree, musing to her partner that maybe the object was put on a branch. We watched as she began pulling herself up the lowest branch, and I remember the way my stomach dropped when all of a sudden we saw the adult shoot out behind the tree, grab her leg, and start pulling her into the darkness of the forest. Her partner ran off screaming, leaving me and Paavo unsure what to do. We watched frozen with horror as the adult began covering the girl's mouth, in some attempt to silence her. Before either one of us could do anything, all of a sudden Tomek came running up the path and threw himself onto the man. Paavo shot out to help Tomek, while I ran back to call for help. When I reached the backyard that was the destination spot for the end of the game, I was screaming uncontrollably in a mix of words that took me a few attempts to get out that help was needed. A large group of the men raced towards the forest while I hid in my mother's arms, waiting for everyone to arrive back safely. My friends Arik, Ava, and Bartek approached me cautiously and asked what had happened and why Paavo and I hadn't come back. It had turned out that after Ava, Bartek, and Arik had distracted the adults and drove them away, the adults had decided to end the time to get the gold item. They had assumed that everyone had a chance to try to get it, and didn't want the kids wandering the forest after dark. One of the adults had already pocketed the item when they chased our group back towards the main backyard. My team had assumed that we would see that there was nothing there and return as well, which is why they didn't come looking for us. As I retold what happened, everyone in the backyard listened to me with wide eyes. About 10 minutes passed and we saw the group of men coming back, Paavo walking aside his father, and the girl who had been attacked, in the arms of her assumed father. After they all approached, I asked Paavo what had happened. As the parents gathered and talked in hushed voices, Paavo described to us how Tomek had beat the guy bloody but let him escape when he turned away, surprised by the men that had arrived to help. He mentioned that a few men were still out there scouting the forest land for the guy. I then asked the remainder of my friends why help was not sent earlier by the girl's partner that had run away screaming. Everyone had looked at me with blank faces, and the sudden realization hit me hard. The next events became a blur. It's a mix of me racing to my parents with my friends and asking about the girl. A frenzy of people calling out her name and begging her to come out. A whirlwind of everyone rushing to get their kids inside. and a mayhem of adults swarming together to go search the woods again and call the police. It's been 8 years now, and she hasn't been found. Tomek was one of the main suspects, believed to be part of a 2-man kidnapping operation, but backed out when he saw that too much attention was brought to the event. I'm not sure whatever happened to him, but I can't help but feel guilty that I didn't do anything to help either of those girls. I saw the girl run away. Paavo and I were the last to see her. Sometimes when I see a child with braided hair, I get thrown back to that night, and I can still see her braids swirling around her as her figure disappeared from sight. Her name was Dorota, and I hope she's alive. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 398. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. We're back in the melty stage of the year. We're all Hellfreezers recording and taking frequent breaks in between stories to cool off. It's not helped by the fact that I'm currently undergoing treatments, coal tar treatments for psoriasis, which so far so good, I guess. But the thing is, you've got to kind of stay wrapped up because it's very messy and quite a bit stinky. Well, you know what tar smells like. So you don't get it everywhere. So I'm currently recording this. It's hot, but I've got my robe on just to keep my arms and everything covered. Well, hopefully it helps. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.